Hello and welcome to the Startup and Career Show, your destination for inspirational stories and real life experiences of startup founders and corporate leaders. I'm your host, Rushabh, in conversation with a journalist turned entrepreneur, Shutapa Paul. After a long career in journalism, she embarked on her entrepreneurial journey by founding Dharma Media. Welcome to the show, Shutapa.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
So, Shutapa, before we talk about your entrepreneurial venture, requesting you to kindly share your professional journey so far, right from your journalism days.
Sure. When I was in school, that is when NDTV then used to be Star News, and we were very inspired by this new crop of television journalists that had taken India by storm. And I wanted to be a TV journalist, and that's how I started my career, incidentally, with NDTV. I spent a good decade plus working through some of the top media brands in the country, television, magazines, newspapers. And by the time I was in my 10th or 11th year, I kind of figured that, I found myself switching jobs very often. And it was also a time for me to have a think on why was I doing it, because I was doing very well in all my jobs, but I kept seeking that challenge, that new opportunity, and something to keep me interested. And that's when I decided to start Dharma Media. We are a boutique size brand building and communications company. We're in our seventh year, and we primarily work in the PVC and startup ecosystem. For me, it's my 17th year in media, so I think it is a sector that I love. It's a sector that I've worked in as a journalist, and it's also a sector in which my business venture is in, which is dealing with media, dealing with content, communication, strategies, brand building, public relations, you name it. One thing that entrepreneurship has given me is freedom, and it's given me the opportunity to do multiple things. I feel that there's a certain time in life when you want to do a lot of things, and a job, at least I'm talking, 7, 8 years ago, could be restrictive. Today, things are more flexible. So along with my entrepreneurial journey, I still continue to write. I anchor shows, I moderate events. I'm a published author. I'm a newspaper columnist, and yeah, so that's what keeps me busy.
Well, that's quite interesting, Shutapa. You're wearing multiple hats. But tell me, if I were to take you back in time, when you moved out of the so-called corporate world and when you started your company, how was the mindset, if I were to ask you? Because see, many people find this as a challenge, right? Many people in their day job, they want to do something, but they are unable to take that step. So what was your mindset that time, leaving the cushion of your paycheck that you get every month? So how was that transition, if you can just give us in gist?
Sure. So it was very interesting how it worked out for me. I was at that time working with Forbes in India, and fantastic team, fantastic brand, one of the top, luxury business magazines, so to speak, tier one. It was a great experience, but then I was approached by a media startup to join as their group editor. And then, startups was, they were picking up pace, and there was that desire to do something in the media space, but as a startup. So I joined that startup. I worked there for around a year. We helped launch a short news app, and there was a lot of tech involved. We were looking at a lot of digital properties. Unfortunately, it was the year that demonetization also happened. It was a year which had a lot of uncertainties, and our investors at that point had backed out. So I figured that that particular stint with the startup is not going to work out long term at that point. and it was important for me to introspect and see what I wanted to do. By then, it was already a year and a half, and I had already established Dharma as an entity, because being in a startup space, I had the freedom. We were not doing anything much with it, but it existed. So that's when I decided that, I was approached by one organization to help them with their media and brand positioning. It started off in a very soft pilot sort of way, and I've got a lot of satisfaction of being able to bring my experience of being a journalist and transition it into the media space of brand building and communications. Interestingly, as I took that on, I received a really big journalistic job as well to launch an international brand in India. And that's when I think I took the decision, and thankfully that job offer also, it hit a roadblock. But by then I had realized that, this is what I want to do, which is build my own company. Because you correctly said, Rishabh, it's not easy to transition from getting a paycheck on the 30th or 31st of a month to being the person giving that paycheck on 30th or 31st of the month. So we started small. Also, we are completely bootstrapped. I'm a single entrepreneur, single founder, with a dominantly woman-led team. So we have a lot of ladies. 90% of our team are ladies, and it has helped because, and I'll be honest, it's helped because of two reasons. One, I picked on my strengths of being in media. So by the time I started or I wanted to do Dharma, I had my experience of how the media space works. The second thing which helped was I was in the services industry. So obviously, because it's service oriented, your investment is less. You have more sweat going into the business. And I think for the longest, I cut costs by doing maybe 5 people, 6 people's jobs, because I knew that that's the only way I knew how. So, well, it was challenging, but it's knock on wood, worked so far. Yeah.
True, absolutely. But you were bitten by that entrepreneurial bug, right? So once you are there, it becomes very difficult to
Yeah.
come out of it, right? In spite of
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
the challenges and all. And absolutely,
It's,
you said rightly, because it gives you freedom as well, no doubt.
yeah. Well, in India, I think in the last 10 years or so, it's hard not to be bitten by the entrepreneurial bug. I think startups, I mean, we are in the most vibrant time in spite of certain exigencies, in spite of the pandemic. I think the entrepreneurial spirit has a great opportunity now to do different kinds of things. And, I always say this, that while we speak about the funded startups, you're going from your pre-series to series A, B, C, you're becoming unicorn, decacorn. We have a great opportunity in our country to build a strong foundation for SMEs, for MSMEs. It's the small businesses which, if they're doing well, form the foundation of a large economy. It helped, say, a Japan. And I think we've also, as a country, kept that in mind. So startups, small businesses are very crucial, in my opinion, to the Indian economy, for the prosperity of our economy.
Oh, absolutely, Shutapa. But now, if you can talk, because you mentioned about Dharma Media and the way you started off. So can you talk about a little more on it? What does it do, and how does it help the startups, especially on the
Right.
SME space as well that you work for?
Right. So, as I said, we work primarily in the PVC and startup ecosystem. We obviously also handle big corporates and individuals as well. Our entire strategy of communications, given my journalistic background, our team, who are amazing, they are extremely agile, they are very adept communications professionals who think in terms of stories. So whenever we look at a brand, whenever we look at a startup, we ask ourselves, what is their story, which is compelling, which is interesting, whether it is interesting to the consumer, whether it is interesting to a journalist, or whether it is interesting to an investor as well. So we help strategize very effective, well thought out communication strategy for various startups as well as corporates, of course. For startups, it becomes very unique because we have partnered startups from their unfunded stage, helped them picked up funding, helped them move from one series to another series of funding. And why PR and why media presence is important for many startups is because investors want to know what you're worth in the public domain. So if you don't have the right positioning, of course, you can still attract investor interest, and not everything is PR. You need to have a business that works. You need to have a model that works. And in today's day and age, I think it's become very clear that your business better be making money, or at least have a roadmap to when you turn profitable. So those things are, of course, very important. But being seen, visibility by your consumers, by your investors, by potential partners is truly important. So when we start handling any of our client partners, and we call them client partners because we believe in long-term relationships, they grow, we grow, and it's a journey that is more interesting. So when we look at any of our client partner, we first try to understand what is their requirement. So with some startups particularly, their requirement is, hey, we've picked up this round, we want to pick up another round, but we need to be seen by the right people. So making sure that they get the right kind of stories out there, the right kind of narrative out there. And how you build your brand is a lot to do with the credibility as well. So when we are advising startups, I personally work with these startups because it goes beyond execution. There is much more thinking for the brand itself, right? So the advice, the suggestion always is that you keep doing your work and create those opportunities wherein our team comes in and helps you get the visibility. We cannot manufacture news.
Yeah.
We cannot have, I know a lot of brand consultants and companies and agencies encourage companies to pay money and buy coverage. We do absolutely the opposite. If you need to buy coverage, it is branded content, it is an advertisement, it is not organic, right? So you go ahead with an advertisement, sponsor an event if that's what you're doing, but be clear that you're paying for it.
Yeah.
The moment you start doing things organically is when you're creating your reputation, right? Your credibility. So these are some, some advice that we do give all our client partners, whether they are startups, whether they are investors, whether they are large corporates, because only if you understand the medium, do you know how to use the medium. End of the day, media is also a sector. And yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely, Shutapa. In fact, what you said is very incredible because many people, they don't understand and how to take certain things forward, right? Especially handling communication. Now, goal of any communication that a startup undertakes is to build brand recognition, right? But it is easier said than done. So, as a first step, how should the startup move forward? Basis your experience, if you can share 2 cents on that.
Sure. So again, no one size fits all. So when we look at an unfunded startup, for example, if you look, if your parents or your uncle, auntie are your first investors and they're cutting you a first check of 2 crores, then you have funds even for a PR campaign. But for those who are truly unfunded to the extent that in today's market, especially, any kind of resources are very precious, so they don't have enough to put out into marketing. So for that, to those startups, I would always say that do it in-house. Whatever your activity is, see how best you can do it in-house. Obviously, if you have the runway, outsource. That's when people like us and our companies come in. We are able to do what you would do with 1%. 1% of that activity, we're able to give you 70% of the additional effort because we have the resources currently for it. But if you're an unfunded startup and you want to get your word out there, my suggestion would be use your social media to the best that you can. LinkedIn is a fantastic medium. If you are a B2C, Instagram is the place to be today, right? Um, Identify people within your team who have a flair for writing, or who are a bit uh, design oriented, or who have a little bit of a witty sense of humor. Identify youngsters who can, at least in the interim, put out those engaging posts. Use technology to the maximum. Use a Canva, which is helping you with design. You can even create short videos on your phone today, thanks to technology. But that is when you're unfunded and you still want to get the word out. Should you have, if you have the resources, we would strongly urge that a certain percentage is kept for marketing. And in that marketing, communications, public relations, social media, very important. And that is when a good strategy on the PR and the digital front can do wonders. Because you're grabbing eyeballs, as I mentioned earlier, your consumers are seeing you, your potential partners are seeing you, your potential investors are seeing you. And the same thing that you want to do with a PR or a social media, it can't exist independently. They all come together to create that brand recall. So depending on budgets, if you have the budgets, good for you. Outsource it to us. If you don't have the budget, there are many mentors that you'll find. Even, I mean, I'm happy to chat with any startup who does not have the budget but wants to do a quick call to understand, hey, we don't have the budgets, what do you think we should do? That is where this is a great ecosystem. We help each other, not because it's transactional, but because we hope that you get some benefit from knowledge that, say, I have accrued over a decade plus, and if I can help somebody with ideas, we're happy to do it. Yeah.
Absolutely, Shutapa. And that is the beauty about the startup ecosystem, right? It's all about helping each other out, and even the unknown people, right? You just put it into the universe, and there are people who are there to help you and guide you, right? Irrespective of the field that you're looking for. That's the beauty.
Absolutely.
But Shutapa, when these startups actually look out and think from a communication standpoint, many times people talk about, okay, that what is my ideal customer, right? So they broadly know the demographics, that these are the age, gender, that I need to target. But demographics is just one part, right? What are the other parameters that startups need to investigate, right, before defining its audience, so to speak, from a communication standpoint? If you can just touch base a bit.
Yeah. Actually, that's a very, this is something which should happen before they put out anything into the public domain. Even before your website comes out, even before your social media page comes out, even at the time that you're making your corporate deck, this is the question to ask: is who's your TG? Who is your target audience? If you're if you're a B2B startup, then your target audience is very different, right? If you're B2C, your target audience is absolutely different. Even within that audience, you need to understand and ask yourself, what is the age bracket that you're looking at? What are the locations that you're looking at? I could be a Bharat startup, right? I'm not a tier one. I work out of tier two, tier three. So for me, my entire audience is basically non-metro. So it's very important to understand where your audience is or likely to be. Obviously, there are overlaps. Say, for example, again, you're a B2B startup, so you have to target another business. So there also you need to understand what are the titles or the designations? What is the level of the person that you are targeting? Should it be only at the CXO level? Are you only looking at sales and marketing? These are strategies which will help when you're putting out content, the language you're putting out, very importantly, if you're running ads as well. Because digital marketing today is one of the most important aspects for any startup that is looking to generate leads using the virtual platforms. So these are very important questions, but more importantly, I think for any business, if we don't know who our TG is, how do we sell? Like
Absolutely.
if you're a product based company and your target is, say, your target are women, so therefore your products are tailored for women. So I'm sure that these are questions which are answered at an earlier stage, but they also evolve. I mean, over time you might your product evolves, your business model evolves, and my suggestion would always be that at least once a year a review should be done on where your messaging is, what your messaging was supposed to be, what you achieved, and maybe you'll discover why 1 year, within 2 quarters, you'll discover that, hey, my entire messaging is all wonky, even when you've used professionals in place. You wanted to say something, but you're saying something else. So, taking a look at what the key messaging of your brand is a very important exercise.
Absolutely, absolutely. But Sutapa, since you are the one who are crafting so many communication strategies for these startups that you work with, can you just share some of them for our audiences? Maybe whichever comes to your mind, on top of mind.
Right. So I wouldn't like to name names. I mean, we do have clients on our website and they are in the public domain. So everybody is free to go and check on them and see, what it is, who are the people that we work with. But some of the campaigns that we have done, which we may have thought would have been very challenging, but we've ended up doing a good job. We see a lot of focus on a digital push. So because a lot of startups have a tech backend, they have a SaaS backend. So we do a lot of campaigns where, tech is the focus. How tech is making healthcare easier, digitization of healthcare. How, today, I think one of the sectors which is the booming sector in India is fintech for the last few years. So what fintech has done to change lives, it's literally changed, transformed our lives. So these are some that we've done, but to be honest with you, the most memorable stories that we've created have been from tier 2 and tier 3 India, because the stories that work there have been very different from the stories that, of course, we're talking about food delivery, we're talking about food tech, we're talking about SaaS companies, but some stories that we've created, which are, we have a client partner who had, they're a construction tech startup called Project Hero. Their entire mission is to digitize how construction workers are supplied, the how construction workers are treated, the fact that most of them don't even get insurance. So that level of grassroots work that happens is as satisfying as something that affects, say, you and I sitting in any of the metros. So that was something which was very interesting for us. One of the startups that we handled, a campaign we did, was for water suppliers. And it was again a tier 2 startup. It's the cans of water that we get, drinking water. So it was a SaaS platform to digitize their businesses. So these are very grassroots level, small businesses, unorganized sectors, laborers who nobody cares of. We all want the buildings, but we don't know who's actually helping build it. So these have been very memorable campaigns. Of course, we do have the big hot sectors of fintech and cybersecurity, and most of our startups are such wonderful partners. I remember we had a little bit of a cyber scare, and then I actually consulted one of the founders and one of the senior management there, saying that I think we are getting hacked and all that. And it's a great place to be, because everybody's got things to discuss, and it's also inspiring. So lots of inspiring stories. We'll need many sessions if I have to talk about all our campaigns.
Wow, that's really incredible. But Shutapa, while you were talking about these things, and I'm sure you would have used different strategies. But when a startup needs to communicate with multiple stakeholders, right, and communication is often looked at external, right, be it customers, investors, or maybe the public at large as well. But many a times, the internal communication is also important, right? The employees, right? A startup also needs a good talent. So just help me understand, how does a startup should tweak its communication strategy while communicating with such individual stakeholders?
Right. So, look, one thing that this is one requirement that we routinely get from startups. One is attracting talent. Um, Even though today we're talking about a job market where there are massive layoffs happening, but good talent is precious, no matter what the job scenario is. So most of our startups tell us that, listen, we've picked up funding, we have the money, but we're not attracting the right talent. It is the unique problem faced by many small businesses as well. So what you communicate on platforms like LinkedIn is very important, because that is where your potential employees are also there. So if a startup wants to attract the right kind of people, they should also put out more about themselves, their work culture, their services on social media like LinkedIn, so that it attracts potential employees as well. Um, Internal communications is important. I think that most startups are very hands on. At least we call ourselves a small business or a startup, and I'm very hands on. So having regular communication with your teams, whether you as a founder are able to take out that time, or you have 200 employees and therefore you can't do with all of them, but making sure that the team leads at least are constantly in touch with the employees. I think regular office memos, if they are sent, they could be, I mean, I'm calling them memos for want of a better word, but it's more about maybe an inspiring thing. Maybe it could be a story that you've read, you find it inspiring, and you send it to your team. um, Having some sort of L&D, because this is something that we are internally thinking about. We have a small team, but learning and development is something very essential. So giving your team a chance to develop, upskill, or learn about a sector which has nothing to do with work. It could be a session on spirituality, it could be a session on work life balance. These are also communications which go from the company. They're not always written. It's all in it's all in what we actually do on ground, that makes a lot of sense. External partners that you mentioned, we find, and of course others too, newsletters are a great way of keeping in touch with any stakeholder, right? It could be your employees, it could be your business partners, your clients. And today, the newsletter is a very powerful tool. We ourselves use it. In fact, ours went out today itself, month in review. And it's just a time to, kind of talk a little about things which we've found inspired, some of the things that we've done well ourselves. And we find that newsletters, rather than WhatsApp. Like WhatsApp is an amazing tool, but I feel that it's just getting too saturated. There is a lot of tiredness with WhatsApp. At least that's the feedback we're getting. From your grocery store wala to your Swiggy to your e-commerce brand, everybody's sending stuff on WhatsApp. While it is convenient, I think attention span on WhatsApp is low. So if you want to attract quality in terms of whether it's customers, you want people to know more about you, then newsletters would be a great way. Social media, again, LinkedIn, I think they're wonderful tools to use.
Absolutely. But Shutapa, apart from using these as a tools, but communication is not just a one-time affair, right? I mean, consistency is also extremely important when you look at communication, and this is
Yeah.
both in terms of messaging as well as timeliness, right? So, according to you, how do you suggest the startups to maintain the consistency in their communication?
Absolutely right. With social media, with public relations, with any communication, it's consistency that matters, right? So this is something that we see with a lot of our startups, some big corporates also. 3 महीना social PR campaign करेंगे फिर बंद हो जाएंगे.
Yeah.
That is not what you're trying to build. If you're a builder, you want to build something, then you're looking at a sustained campaign, whether it's PR, whether it's social media, it's sustained. If you have a news announcement and it's an important news announcement, obviously you will create ripples in the market. But the challenges, and that is where experts like us come in, is when do you consistently create news, you consistently remain in news without actually paying for the news, and without actually many times not having enough news. It's true, you can't be announcing big things all the time, but that is when you need to plan, you need to strategize, you need to come up with content ideas which will work on social media. I think a healthy social media frequency of posting should be at least 2 to 3 posts a week. It is healthy, it is easy to do. Start at least with one. But the main thing is, if you've done one this week, definitely do the second one in week 2 and the third one in week 3. Try not to have that gap, like दो कर दिया पोस्ट उसके बाद 3 हफ्ता कुछ नहीं.
Right.
So that is where you need to strategize, you need to make a plan, a content planner. Use technology which allows you to schedule posts. If you have a small team and you don't have resources to outsource either, then use technology which allows you to make a content planner and you've scheduled it for the next few weeks. Consistency is key, because once your audience, whether it is those who are reading news stories or those who are on the digital side, once they are used to receiving that content from you, they will be expecting that content from you, including newsletters. They are expecting it, that it's going to come. So if you do like once in 3 months also, if you do a newsletter, do it. But after those 3 months, get back with a newsletter, right? Unless you have something to announce earlier on. So consistency is very important. I think that is the backbone of any communication strategy.
Absolutely, absolutely. But Shutapa, you did mention about social media, right? That startup needs to look at it as well. But there are multiple channels of communication, right? But how to choose a right one? Yes, people start with social media, but how do they go about it? Because you also have traditional media, and its traditional media is also pretty big. You have print, you have radio, and there are the others as well on the digital side of things. So how to choose the right channel of communication for a startup, if you can just add there.
Right. So that's also a very interesting question. See, look, radio is a tough one, right? Radio does not allow news, so we are restricted by that. The only way that you can use radio is brand association. You pay for certain campaigns, and radio would be a medium of choice for B2Cs. I would say any consumer company who's out there looking for, you know you have a toothpaste and you want to talk about it, or you have a healthcare product and you want to talk about it, radio is very powerful. Print, I mean, there was, when we were in college and I was in journalism school, we used to, we were discussing then that print is dead. It's going to be 20 years, and print is very much alive and kicking. But it's also a very saturated space. There is just this much of space that everybody's fighting over, right? So if a unicorn and a decacorn is getting quoted in that page, on that page, the chances of a small startup getting into that is extremely challenging. And the sooner startups understand this, how space allocation in newspapers works, it's better for them, right? So print, while something we'd love to do, I would suggest that whether your news is worthy of print coverage. Will it get? It's online where you want to be at today. It has the most eyeballs, it gets the most visitors. It is also, there is no space crunch. You have so many platforms, younger platforms. You have media platforms like Your Story, Entrepreneuring, 42N Tracker, which are only looking at startups. So you have that kind of field. I know many of them have now started saying that there are commercials involved, but keep pitching for organic coverage, unpaid coverage, which is based on your product, your vision, your service. It could be any of them. Where social media is concerned, again, if you're a consumer company, you want to be on Facebook and Instagram, right? Twitter, unfortunately, has a very different algorithm. It'll work only if you have something interesting and witty to share. And today, now with a lot of Twitter changes, I mean, I'm not hazarding any guesses on Twitter right now with all the the changes that have happened, and I've lost my blue tick, so I have to now see if I get it back. But one platform which used to be very underrated, but today is a leading platform, is LinkedIn in terms of content. If you, just like Instagram for consumers, if you want to get your consumers, you want them to buy any of your products, whether it's a cookie or a pair of jeans, Instagram is great. But similarly, LinkedIn, with its very new and enthused lead generation campaigns that they're doing, if you have anybody who understands digital marketing or you outsource it, it's a great way of tapping the right audiences as well. A startup should definitely think about where they want to be seen. Like, we have many who will be like, we want to be seen on Instagram, and we're like, but that's not your audience. Nahi, but dikhna hai to theek hai, but what is the benefit that you're getting?
True.
That is what we need to understand, that where do you want to be seen, why do you want to be seen, what will you get out of it? The ROI of it has to be very, very clear before choosing.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Otherwise, it's like a burning hole. You keep on spending money and you'll not get much out of it. Absolutely. But Shutapa, in this world of smartphones to smart TVs, even the communication needs to be smart, right? I mean, the communication needs to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. So, can you talk a little bit on that aspect as well? That how to make the communication smart, so to speak.
Right. Look, a well-written post or a well-written press release does wonders. I mean, because we're talking about two things, I know I keep going from PR and social media, but that's the truth. I mean, as a consumer, if I read a social media post with a lot of typos and spelling errors, it puts me off. It also comes across as an unprofessional communication going out from a brand, whether it's a large brand, small brand. Human errors are unavoidable, but when mistakes are made, if you need to go and change them, soon, ASAP, right? A good press release, a good press note is also a great way of winning media friends. If you're trying to make your mark with journalists, and we will have to assume that most journalists are still good writers, when their stories finally come out, of course, they've had editors look at it and copy desk people, but the stories itself are supposed to read well, without any errors, backed by facts. So these are certain things that one must keep in mind. When you say smart, I also say that you can put out smart communication if you work hard enough. Research needs to go into any communication, whether it's going through an agency, through an internal team, or from the founder of the startup itself. Be sure about what you're speaking, and then package it well. Research it and package it well, whether it's for public relations, whether it's for internal communications, external communications, and social media. The other thing that most of our social media tools, for example, they allow us to track analytics, a basic sense of analytics everybody is giving you. Track those analytics, see how your posts are being received. Are you doing well with a video rather than a static creative? Are people engaging with the polls that you're running, right? So people need to be tracking it, at least start with weekly basis, monthly basis, at least minimum once a month, look at it, right? And if a lot of your lead generation is coming from social media, then it does require big budgets. It's not 200, 300 rupees anymore. So there is a lot of, it has to be healthy budgets consistently pumped on various social media channels. Parallelly, you're doing SEO and driving traffic to your website. And there are other experts who do this, whose only job is to make sure that you're seen virtually. So we as communicators also take the help of those experts whose only job is to make sure that your page is consistently number one, right? Because these are techies, they're sitting and making sure that it's being seen. But even they tell us, their feedback is, look, if the content is not good, it is not supporting us. But if your content is engaging, it's interesting, your IPL chal raha hai, to IPL pe kuch apne funny sa kar diya. Yeah, you have the Oscar winners and you decide that you should say something to congratulate the Oscar winners. It's a matter of national pride. So some of these things are smart strategies that you use to stay in the news, right? Everybody's talking about Chat GPT, you talk about Chat GPT, you are in the news. People use memes and stay very relevant. These are all smart content, actually. It's just content that stands out. Any communication that is well researched and well thought out and put forward will always have better acceptability.
Absolutely. And in today's day and age, content marketing plays a huge, huge role, right? And it's important for everybody, whether you're an early stage startup or a big bank corporate, right? It's
Yeah.
one of the most important tool that people need to leverage. But Shutapa, before you leave, any last advice that you would want to give founders, especially on the communication side of things?
I think so. We've, in our experience, I've found two kinds of founders and founding teams, rather. Those who really understand media, understand the power of media, and they want to use it effectively for their business. And we've had great joy working with those founders. Then we have a category of founders who don't know anything, but they are like sponges. They want to learn. They say that, we are not subject matter experts. Y'all are the experts, guide us. This is also a group that we've enjoyed working with. The third group, which are the worst, is they don't understand media, they don't want to understand media, but their expectations are sky high. you know I mean, you want to reach the moon, but before you reach the moon, you have to do a lot of groundwork, right? So to some founders especially, and to all founders in general, I must say that keep your expectations realistic. Any communications team that you have, whether it's in-house, whether it's outsourced, don't expect unrealistic deliverables. Don't set unrealistic deliverables which they can't give you. You pick up $100 million in funding and then you don't get a story, then you have a bad team. But if you don't have news to give, but you want yourself out there, then work together with the team that you have or the team that you've outsourced with and ideate. Brainstorm ideas. And I'm sure that some kind of ideas, some stories, some narratives will work. But be realistic, be a bit patient. That is my suggestion to startup founders.
Absolutely, Shutapa. On that note, thank you for taking out time today with us. I think it was lovely speaking to you. And I think you did share some of the real practical advices that people can follow. It was great having you here, Shutapa.
Thank you so much for having me, Rishabh. I loved interacting with you, and I think you asked such amazing questions. I think I hope your viewers find value, and if anybody wants to touch base and, as I said, ideate, I'm more than happy to do that. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. So to all our listeners, thank you guys for joining us. We continue on our mission of bringing more such infotainment conversations for you. Goodbye, guys. Signing off for now.